Ladies and gentlemen, my college roommate and one of my best friends, Dr. Christmas, Bob Pranga.
Is everybody having a great time at this expo? I'm very proud of my dear friend. I mean, he and Chuck have got an incredible lineup, you know, and when he called me on the phone, first of all, I couldn't believe he called me. And because I'm really, that right there, gulp, that's me, okay? Whenever you ask me to do anything, most people usually go gulp, okay? And so I applaud them on getting out of their comfort zones and taking bold action and hiring a star. Anyway, I have to have a little background with Rick and I. I mean, yeah, it is true. I've known Rick since college, okay, odd years ago and stuff like that. And Rick described me pretty well. I like to use, is anybody here a fan of The Simpsons? Okay. There was a great little episode where Bart Simpson went to see Anthony Robbins, the cartoon. And Anthony Robbins, as you all know, is Mr. Motivational Speaker, blah, you know. And he's sitting there going, you know, all of you out here, you know, I like you gotta be a human being, a human doing. And Bart goes, I'm a human going. And he gets up and leaves. And so we have this big running joke that I'm kind of like that little Bart Simpson because I'm always the reluctant traveler on this little jaunt here. But, and then after Rick said, do you want to do it? I said, okay, this should be fun. Well, then yesterday I sat through all those really terrific seminars. And then I realized, well, I can't dance. I can't sing. I don't have a mystic bridge. And then all of a sudden I thought, okay, calm down, you can do this. And I'll be damned if Mother Teresa doesn't show up this morning. I mean, really. I mean, yeah, I'm all ready to talk about Kim Kardashian, Paris Hilton, and, you know, Lynn's up here being all deep and wonderful and telling these things, and I'm going, oh, this will be great. So my only explanation is, and I borrowed this line, but I love it, is that this morning we started at the deep end of the pool, and now we're going to the shallow. Now, I want you guys, throughout this whole little adventure here, I love questions, and I'm not afraid to answer anything. So whatever you want to know, is my hair really blonde, you know, am I really this thin, I will answer it truthfully. And if so, and I do mean this throughout the whole seminar, I want you just to be able to feel free to like, hey, Bob, I want to know something, okay? And I'll stop what I'm doing if I'm not seeing anything too interesting, and I will come right to you. But let's go back a little bit. I'm actually from a little town called Sturgis. Now, some of you may have heard Sturgis. Oh, yes, the bikers, the racing. Well, we're the other one. There's another little town called Sturgis, Michigan. Yeah, I know. I see. Yeah, okay. Sturgis, Michigan is this tiny little town located between Chicago and Detroit. It was on US 12, a major little town until they moved the highway, you know, kind of the common thing in story. And really, Sturgis really isn't known for anything. Our biggest claim to fame was a young lady by the name of Helen Bishop. Now, has anybody heard of Helen Bishop? Okay. Well, Helen Bishop was this wonderful debutante who happened to be booked on the RMS Titanic. And while she was on Titanic, you know, she happened to save several dogs and, you know, a few people. And, you know, we're like, oh, we have a local hometown hero, and she came home. Well, poor Helen Bishop, you know, she wasn't home a week, and the poor thing tripped on a can of peaches, fell down the stairs, and died. Tragic, isn't it? No, what's more tragic is what follows. We had a Helen Bishop Peaches Festival. So we have a whole cookbook dedicated to Helen Bishop and several ways that you can use peaches. So within this little realm of a small town, which I actually have to say, my childhood in Sturgis, Michigan was pretty much kind of like the Wonder Years. It was very fun. You know, it was a different time period, and, you know, I can't say too many things about it that, you know, are disparaging, but I'm sure I'll find a few along the way. But I did know one thing about Sturgis is that I always had the feeling that as I was growing up that I was kind of put in the wrong place. And, you know, it's a very little kind of conservative town, and I would wander around the city and, you know, making people laugh or making fun of things, you know, because I was one of those, you know, we've talked about this before, and like I said, I don't let it really own me anymore. It's like I was kind of that little fat kid who made jokes in the class, and I talked to a lot of my school teachers, you know, and if you go back, I talked a lot in class, because if you go back through all of my stuff, you know, my record, you'll see Bobby Pranga, little Bobby Pranga. That was really amusing, because I was never little. And they say, little Bobby Pranga, he is just such a wonderful guy, but he talks too much in class. And my mother would constantly say, well, you got a good report card, and I go, I know I talk too much in class, which obviously I haven't stopped doing. And when my folks split up later on in life, and we ended up moving out to the farm. Now, I mean, can you see me on a farm? Okay. So all of a sudden, I developed all these fabulous allergies. You know, I was allergic to mowing the grass. I was allergic to walking in the corn. I was allergic to anything that had to do with livestock. Okay. And from that point on, I was just going, I got to get out of here. I don't know where I'm going to go, what I'm going to do. And along came college time. Now, I picked a college basically because it had a pretty name, okay? Its name was Hope College, and it's located in Holland, Michigan, which is about 2 hours away. And I figured, well, 2 hours is just far enough away and just close enough, you know, so that you could have a little bit of life and still visit the family. And I basically picked it because it was a pretty little town. And that's actually where I met Rick. You know, he was actually living with Kevin Bailey, who's Reverend Mellon's partner at this point. And I remember Rick because, you know, and like I said, I've known Rick a long time before he became the great prophet, okay? So, but I want you to know that back then, Rick even was doing it then. Because here you have a bunch of freshmen, okay? We're in a dormitory called Durfee Hall, okay? And, you know, freshman guys, we're all in the all-male dorm. Everything's trying to be really butch. I was so butch. And Rick gathers us all down in the lobby. And I remember this very, very well because Rick came to, in those days, which maybe I'll show the picture in just a moment, he had a big head of red curly hair. And, I mean, it was fro, baby. And he had a mustache, and he had wide cords, and, you know, and he came to us and... Bad. But, and all I could think of was like, oh, God, was this. So anyway, he sits us all down, and he's making us go around the circle because he wanted every... Are you feeling me here, people? Are you feeling me? Okay, so it's all this, hi, I want to know about your life, and what is your goals, and what is your major, and tell me what your future is. And we're all like, oh, no. And truthfully, at the time, we made a lot of fun of it. I mean, but here we are, which I think is pretty amazing. He's being wonderful, still sitting in circles, telling people to come in, loving everyone, and I'm up here making fun of it. So not a lot has changed. Okay. It's nice to know that you have some good constants in your life. Well, Chuck asked me to share this story with you. This is one of those college things. Now, okay, you're going to think poorly of me. But one day, a bunch of us decided that we wanted to party. Now, we went to a Christian school. As you can see, it stuck. And it was a dry campus, much like here. And we were, you know, you had to do everything under the slide. Well, we wanted to have a big party in our room. Well, Rick's room, unfortunately, was like right in the main hallway, and he always left his door open because he adored Karen Carpenter and thought we all did too. So while the blissful sounds of Karen coming out of the dorm room, you know, the guys are like, how are we going to get these cases of beer up here? And I went, leave it to me. So I walked in there and got sad face and, you know, did that freshman thing of like, you know, I'm having problems with my class and I need someone to talk to. So I walk in And I just go inside the door, and Rick's like, well, sure, sure, because I love Rick. And I'm not making fun of him, but kind of am. And and he just says, come on in, let's talk about it. Let's see what's going this. In the meantime, I'm leaning in, going, oh, and my arm's outside the door going, waving the beer in down the hallway. Which I never told him this until years later, because I really didn't want to hurt his feelings. But it was one of those great college things. And Kevin later became my roommate after Rick went on to Washington and stuff. But he was always around. And in the last 30 years, he's been hugely influential with me. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about Rick a little bit later. But as we keep going here, when we left the college, because we're going to tell you a little bit of the life story, because what I'm offering up today to all of you is that I'm going to tell you everything that we have done. I'm going to tell you all the different experiences I have had. And anybody that wants to come up here and tell me what it all means, I welcome it. Now, I have always prided myself on having a fairly unusual life, okay? I get bored easily. If you want something broken or the rules broken, you usually ask me. If you want something said, I'll just do it because I am very impatient. So just come and ask me, and I'll take the blame for everything. So that's kind of the premise I want to do. So after we left college, I actually went to New York City. And I got a job working for Lorne Michaels from Saturday Night Live. And, it was as an internship, and he had a little offshoot show called the News Show. So we bounced back and forth between his brand new show on CBS and Saturday Night Live. And this was really my first big exposure to, whoa, I think we're hitting the big time. And because, I come from a small town, and my family was always, and they remind me of this, I used to sit down in front of the TV, and I used to tell them as a small child going, I'm moving to Hollywood, and I'm going to know celebrities. And my mother used to say, oh, sure you are, honey, trying to make me feel better. Well, here I was in New York City, and I arrived on a rainy night in January. And my mother is frightened to death that I've decided to go to New York City. She sat me down right before I left and said, honey, do you really want to move to a big city? And I said, as opposed to what? And she goes, and then she thought about it. My mother said something very enlightened. And she says, well, I guess if you're not happy here and you stay here, you're going to be miserable, and that's really not a life. So I'm frightened to death for you. I hope you have enough money. Make sure you keep yourself dry, and good luck. So I went to New York, and I arrived that night, and they put us up kind of in one of those intern hotels, which was at that time in Times Square, which wasn't the nicest neighborhood. And I got into an elevator, and here was this very fashionable lady in the elevator with this very questionable gentleman. And they're riding up, and I'm going, oh my gosh, I think she's a hooker. And I was so excited. And, we get off and blah, 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 blah. Well, that's the wrong term. As we get going, I go to use the telephone. I call my mother. I said, hey, Mom. She said, did you arrive all right? All right, is everything going to go okay? And I said, Mom, I have to tell you, I think I'm going to like it here. And so we were in New York for one semester and went back and graduated. But during that time on Saturday Night Live and the new show, I actually acquired friendships with many of the stars like Carrie Fisher and Terry Garr and a lot of these people who later on became my clients 20-some years later. Who thought in those days that just because you got to go to a big star party, that these people were going to be in your lives later? And they all showed up, which is really pretty fascinating to me. And, of course, the dream of always working in television, like everything, doesn't always last. The minute you think that, oh, I've made it, I'm done, I've got it, I'm riding in limos, I'm hanging with stars, then all of a sudden you don't have a job. And then I'm like, okay, what am I going to do now? And I thought, well, I already know stars, so it must be obvious I must be one, okay? And I got this from Gilda Radner. Now, some of you may remember Gilda. Gilda was a charmer. And I got the great pleasure of working with her. And this is what she gave me. When I was an intern running all over the set and, waiting on everybody, I worked for a horrendous crazy woman, okay, which became a pattern as my life went on. And I used to say I specialized in the crazy and the deranged. And boy, the universe gave it to me in spades. And anyway, Gilda, one day, I ran into her dressing room. And I sat down a basket of fruit, and this huge basket of fruit. She says, honey, why don't you sit down and have some? And I said, Gilda, I can. I'm just an intern. I'll get in a lot of trouble. And she said, honey, you look very tired. And I said, Gilda, I appreciate it, but you're young and you're trying to do right and you're trying not to get fired and you're being scared and doing all this stuff. And she got up and she closed the door and she said, sit down. And I said, okay. And I said, okay, ma'am. And she said, don't call me ma'am. I remember that. And she says, now sit down and eat. You need to take care of yourself if you're going to work in this business. And I said, well, Gilda, what's going to happen once I leave here and they can't find me and I'm going to get in all this trouble? She said, honey, if there's ever a problem, you just tell them you were helping me because I'm the star. And I sat there and that went, and I went, oh. This is how, and she didn't mean it in a mean way, but she meant it in a way of somebody who had gotten to her professional top and decided that she wasn't going to take any nonsense from all of this stuff around there. And I thought, and then of course, I thought, well, I'm going to be a star. But, that didn't happen quite right away. And in the meantime, I decided that, well, I got to make a living. Well, it was also about this time, Rick had moved to the city about this time. And, we were all doing the acting thing and working in survival mode, and I was working all of these hateful jobs of waiting tables and, in corporate. Can you see me in corporate? It didn't work well. But I went to corporate, and I always tell people that this was the impetus for when I decided that I had to do it myself and I had to come up with something. Because I sat one day and had planned to go to lunch with somebody at 1 o'clock. And they came to me and told me, I'm sorry, you can't take your lunch at 1 o'clock. You have to take it at 11:30. Those are the days with a 30-minute lunch and 2 15-minute breaks, okay? And I sat there and I was furious. And I just steamed about that. And I said, no, you can't. I have a lunch date. I have a commitment with somewhere else. No, you have to take your lunch at 11:30. And in that moment, I thought, this has got to change for me because no one is going to tell me when to eat for the rest of my life. And now my friends make great fun of me because every time they call me, what are you doing? I said, I'm at lunch. I'm lunching here, I'm lunching there. I mean, you'll hear Chuck say it every so often, like, what is it that you do? Because I always call them in the middle of the day because, they're always working, and I'm really not interested in working. And I call them, and I used to call Rick at work, and several of his jobs go, hey, what are you doing? And he'd say, I'm working. And the concept of working was just alien to me. I mean, we did so much of it, coming from the Midwest, that you got to work a lot, you got to work really hard, you can't have too much. And I thought, well, this isn't working for me, so I kind of started this little Christmas thing. And it actually came about as an accident. And it really only started lightly in New York because I was still in actor mode and I was still trying to survive. And I got a job working at Macy's department store. And I was down working in pantyhose, and let me tell you, you have not lived until a bridal party comes in and wants to buy pantyhose. And costume jewelry. And I was fascinated by the dynamics of people and their personalities because, when you have somebody coming up to you and go, the bride, it's always the bride, and she comes up and she goes, I want to have the most beautiful earrings for all my girls, but not too beautiful. There's always that energy around it. And I was like going, oh, okay. Well, while I was doing this helping them, I got pulled away, and they said, would you come upstairs because we're having problems in the Christmas department. Now, Macy's is big for the big Christmas, their Santa Claus and all this stuff. So I went up, and I just helped them put up Christmas trees. And somebody ran up to me and said, oh, you know what? You're doing a good job. We're going to keep you up here. I went, fine, this beats pantyhose and costume jewelry, let me tell you. So anyway, I was up there, and one day while I was just up there futzing around, Mia Farrow walked in, and she said, wow, that's beautiful. I wish somebody would do that in my home. And, I was 22, 23, I think I was, and I said, well, I'm from the Midwest. I said, sure, I'll go help you. I didn't know, there was all this protocol. So I ended up going over there and helping her set up her Christmas tree, and I thought this was kind of fun, But it still didn't quite stick for me because I still had the dreams of the stardom and being a movie star and doing all of this stuff. And New York, I was there about 5 years, and I met my business partner, Debbie Starrin, actually in a commercial acting class, and she had told me she was moving to LA. And I go, well, I'm tired of the cold, let's go to Hollywood. So we ended up in Los Angeles. I've been there the last 26 years. I have to say, I'm one of those people that absolutely adores and loves the city of Los Angeles. Now, you don't find very many people who say many nice things about it. But I'm one of those people, and I have to say, and I will defend it whenever I can. And so it actually was, I believe, I think either it was Aubrey or Charles had said when they got into New York, they felt like they were home. When I finally landed in Hollywood, I said, this is it. And so I thought, well, now I'm in LA. What am I going to do? You know, I'll be a big star, of course. So, but in the meantime, I had developed I was a tour guide in New York City, you know, giving tours. A kid from Michigan was giving tours of New York City, which I thought was very amusing. But I did that, and I transferred it out to LA when I got here. I said, a survival job, I'll go ahead and be a tour guide. And you know, I have a whole book just on being a tour guide. I have to share this one story because it's amusing. We're in Manhattan. We're down at the Battery. And all of a sudden, we're standing in front of the Statue of Liberty and the trade towers, everything was still there. And I'm talking about everything down there. And this lady asked me, and she says, excuse me, I have a question. She goes, where's the island with the prison on it? Now, I gave her a benefit of the doubt because Rikers Island sits over there, you know. And I said, Rikers Island? She goes, no, the famous one where the Birdman lives. And I went, Alcatraz? And she goes, yes. I go, well, that's in San Francisco. And she goes, oh, I can never remember what city I'm in. And, you know, it was a glorious job. I have tons of stories on that, but that's not what we're here to hear on that. You can read that in the next book. But when I came to LA, I was a tour guide here, but this time we were giving tours of the stars' homes. It wasn't quite as interesting because after, you know, 2 or 3 years of driving by the same houses, you're making shit up, okay? It's like, you know, it got to the point where people were coming to you and going, oh, whose house is this? And I'd go, whose do you want it to be? And I'm like, I'm done. You know, I'm done. But there was also another pivotal moment in that. Now, I had, you know, I'm patting myself on the back, but at that time, I became like the #1 most requested tour guide in the city. Because I don't know why, I just was. And, well, I got a little full of myself, and I one day said, well, you know, I'm just not going to do those trips to Disneyland anymore. I am not going anymore. Those were hateful. You know, let the new kids do it. I'm just not doing it. Well, the boss didn't feel that way. And he said, you know what? I think you've reached the end of what you can do here. And I was like, what are you talking about? He says, you'll thank me, but I'm going to let you go. And I was like, whoa. And I walked out to the pool, and I went back, and I said, you know what, Fred? His name was Freddie Schwartz. He was a guy from New York, and, you know, he was just a wild man. But I said, Freddie, you have to promise me something, because I heard something inside in that moment. I said, if I come back to you, no matter how much you need me or how much I beg you, or if I'm really in dire straits, do not give me a job. And he goes, agreed. And I thought about that decision when I walked out, and I thought, I don't know what I just did there, but I just cut off my livelihood. But what I actually did was I forced myself to actually do something else. And it was obviously one of the best decisions I had made, because shortly after that, I got hired in a Christmas store that was owned by Kathy and Rick Hilton, Paris Hilton's folks, okay? Now, I can do a whole show on the Hilton family. But I will say this about them. They gave me my first chance, okay? And they actually put me through, well, it was difficult, and it was positive, it was negative, it was all these things, but I learned an awful lot. In fact, Kathy Hilton pulled me aside one day, and she said, you want to make it in this town, you watch me. And I was like, I was curious by that, but you know what? The whole concept of the Hilton girls and everything was created by the mother. So everything, that whole industry, and the only insider I'll give you on that is because, you know, the Hilton girls do not get any of the inheritance. So it all goes to the boys. So Kathy had realized that her daughters were going to get the short end of the thrift. So she created Paris and Nikki Hilton, who, as we all know, the history of what happened with their, created success on their own so they would be taken care of. And you know, and I mean, a lot of people are quick to, you know, hit down on Paris Hilton. And I'm just going to say something nice about her. Because the one thing I will give you about Paris, and I tell this every time somebody goes, oh, she's this, she's rich, she doesn't know the real life, and all this sort of thing, is that the world that those people live in, and Lynn touched on it this morning, is a very different world. And there's an extreme amount of pressure that goes on within that world. But think about this. If you were 22 years old, and you could wake up every morning and know everything was possible, because you had the financial resources, you had the name, you had everything at your disposal, what would you do with it? And Paris, I don't think was much different than any other 22-year-old girl that, you know, had a lot of bad behavior, made poor choices, and did a lot of things. But underneath that all, and she's not dumb like she portrays on TV, and pink is not her favorite color. It's actually black. And if you go to her house is all done in black and silvers and all this stuff, but the lower half of her house is a pink palace. And I asked her one day, I said, Paris, do you like walking through here and seeing all these pictures of yourself? And she goes, Bob, that's the business. She goes, the Paris that lives downstairs is not the Paris up here. So I just like to share that because I like to give a little balanced approach to her, because she doesn't always get the fair thrift in media. And, you know, part of it is her willingness to let it go due to marketing. But as you notice, she's kind of like slipped off the radar. Yeah, and as we all know, her dear friends, the Kardashians, picked up the slack, and now they're rolling along. Okay. So anyway, we were in L.A., and Kathy was helping me, and she, one day, and I have to tell this funny story, because there were these moments when Kathy would come to me and said, you know, there's certain ways that you act around famous people, and you really should take the time to know about them before you approach them, because people like to hear this. And I'm like going, okay, Kathy, I'll do it. Well, one day, Shirley Jones walked in. We all know Shirley, and she was Partridge Family or the musicals and stuff. And Kathy said, now I'm going to show you how to do this. So she walks up to Shirley Jones. She says, Miss Jones, I just want to tell you I loved you in The Sound of Music. And Miss Jones goes, why, thank you, and walks away. And then Kathy goes, that's how you do it. And I said, Kathy, she was in The Music Man. Julie Andrews was in The Sound of Music. And then Kathy looks at me and goes, it doesn't matter. And I went, and I didn't understand that concept. I did not understand that concept until later, when you find out in the game of Hollywood, as long as somebody is recognizing you or your marketing and stuff, it's fine. I was like still in Midwest values and going, well, I would have been very offended and all that stuff, and then I learned to let that go. And how I learned to let that go was with Rick. Oh, you know what? I forgot to show, but I'm going to show it to you at the end. When Rick came to me, he was at the time working for Corn Ferry. You know, he had moved there, and he was working for Corn Ferry. You know, to me, it was a hateful place, and, you know, all my friends were entrapped there, and poor Rick was working all the time, working very, very hard, and to the point that it actually endangered his health. And when he finally decided to make that decision to leave, he said, I'm going to come back, and he said, I want to be a life coach. And, of course, you know, you heard earlier, I was like, oh, brother. You know, I mean, I'm a skeptic on all of this stuff all the time. I'm like, I have images of what do I have to polish my crystal and come over and do all of this stuff, and, you know. And he says, no, and I want you to be my first client. I said, okay, because he was my friend. We did it. Now, during the course of that, this is where kind of the impetus of Dr. Christmas. I had already started to do a little bit of the Christmas decorating through the Hiltons and stuff, and I was calling myself the Christmas guy. And one day, a lady came into the store, and she said, well, can you come to my house? I said, oh, yeah, I work 24 hours. And she said, you're like a doctor of Christmas. And that's how I got the name. And I said, Doctor of Christmas. Well, anyway, I started to talk to Rick about this. And, you know, my biggest issue in life is always like, I don't like to work. I think work is a waste of time. I want to be free, and I want to go out and play. I want to live Annie Maeme's life. You know, life is a banquet, and, you know, blah, 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 blah. And he gave me the most important advice that I could have ever gotten in this career. What he did for me was that he said, well, then stop making it work and make it a game. Now we're talking to me. Okay. So then, as you saw in the video a little bit, I started thinking, well, I'll just get on television. You know, nobody told you couldn't do all these things. And, you know, it's really great. When you're ignorant, you get so far. because you don't know all the rules that keep you back. So I just started the whole thing and it started to snowball. And then I realized that if you really wanted to make serious money in this, you had to get on television, and all of a sudden, then you had to be something, an expert of something. So my friend Scott from New York, I was saying, what am I, a decorator? And, Christmas decorating. He says, what, do you decorate cakes? Because I go, no. And he goes, you're more like a tree stylist. And I thought, tree stylist. And then I thought, to the stars. And I thought, and that worked for me. So Debbie and I kind of started this company where we were going around and setting up for folks, and it kind of snowballed from there. And then we got all of this. One thing led to another, and eventually, as you saw in the video, we did get a coffee table book out of it. And I'm rambling along here, and everyone's so enraptured by me. Do you have any questions before we continue on my wonderful life story? Okay, well, I got them. So anyway, what happened from all of this is that we started getting so busy, we weren't really prepared for the success. And then we got the coffee table book, and then we got this, and then we got that. And I started to get a little bit overwhelmed because there was a part of me that was like a little embarrassed by being this cartoon known as Dr. Christmas. I will say that. Because I thought, well, I still somewhere back here thought, well, if you ever want to be an actor, you're going to be forever labeled as that Christmas guy who comes on TV and decorates and blah, 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 blah. And I had a little moment of that. And I had a couple years where it just really kind of took over. And as my friends will tell you, nobody wanted to be around me during the holidays because I was so miserable. I was miserable. I mean, here I am out there in TV land telling you that, oh, it's Christmas, and my goal in life is to have everybody come together and do all this stuff, and none of it was coming to me, which I kind of resented at the time. And so I decided that you either have to embrace this and change it up or stop. So I decided, well, also I was 40-some years old by that time. I thought, oh, do you really want to start over again? We decided to alter it. So we started to add on to it. I had to keep it interesting. So we started Dr. Christmas Rents, and this was out of practicality and also part of something new to do. And we started to get involved in the film community. And we started to do all the TV shows and the films and stuff like that, which actually gave me a little bit of both my lives. I got to work on sets. They thought you were the expert. You got to go on TV. You do all this stuff, and I thought, well, this is working for me. And I love to talk about Christmas films, because my new kind of goal right now is that I've noticed that Hollywood is really taking Christmas down a really kind of a sad path, because every time I'm now called to do a Christmas tree on a set, somebody's got to be murdered in front of it, or somebody's going to be this, or, violence enacted, or, there's never any happy moments. And, we all remember watching A Miracle on 34th Street and It's a Wonderful Life. There are reasons that we watch those every year, because there is a certain amount of enchantment and fantasy that occurs around it. However, I do have to poke just a minor bit at It's a Wonderful Life. I love to talk about this because you know the story of George Bailey, and thought his life was really crappy and he had to get out of town and blah, blah, blah. And then when he's taught his lesson, we go to this alternate universe, and he's going through town, and and the worst thing you come away from that movie in that part of the world is like his poor wife Mary, okay? The worst thing in those days was to be an old maid. Did you ever notice that? I mean, all this stuff going around, and my God, Mary's an old maid, and the movie's over, okay? And we seem to overlook that little section of the film where Violet has become the town hooker, and that's okay. and it's true if you think about it. That amuses me. It has nothing to do with what I was talking about, but I always bring that up because I find that very amusing, even though I love It's a Wonderful Life. Other things that, right now, as you can see on the video, we're working right now on getting our own television show. Anybody think I can do it? Okay. It's always good to hear. So we're working on that because there's a much bigger plan involved there, because not only for my personal satisfaction, I love to be on TV, and I love to work on shows, and I love to meet people, and I love to talk to them. But I also want to create an even bigger avenue for exposure, because I have this little idea that came across, and if I can share the story real quick with you. I have a good friend of mine his name is David Whaley. Chuck is so right. He wanted me to talk about this because this is that moment that gets me a little bit. David is a very good friend of mine. I met him about 5 or 6 years ago. And he was kind of this odd fellow we met in aerobics class. And we became friends. And I was talking about Christmas like I always do, and I was so excited by this. And he just looked at me and he says, well, I just hate Christmas. He says, it's just a painful time for me. And I was like, I couldn't conceive of that because we had the Wonder Years Christmas and all this wonderful thing. And I asked him why. And David basically, because what will come out of this story is actually a really cool thing at the end. But I asked David why, and he says, well, David had one of those terrible, terrible Lifetime movie lives. He was born in the hollers of Tennessee, and his parents left him, abandoned him, his grandmother, who could not take care of him, and then put him in a Catholic orphanage home, okay? And then what happened was the whole process of being abandoned and then going from the orphanage, and when they dissolved the orphanages, they went to foster home to foster home to foster home. And poor David, just went through this whole process, grinning and bearing it, getting some issues, getting very damaged, went into the Navy. He's really a brilliant guy. He has 3 patents with the U.S. government. He has all of this stuff. And the reason he was in L.A. was that he's such an honest kind of guy. He was a whistleblower. And he had to be relocated. And that's why he was in Los Angeles, because he had some very unfriendly people coming after him. Okay, and so that's all in the past, and all of that is fine. But what resulted in that is that David, as he got, in the last 3 years, and this to me is still unbelievable, he gets contacted by this guy who says he's his brother. And the brother says that their mother has died. Now, David always called his birth mother the female. He said the male and female who had me. He would not call them mother or father. And he agreed to meet with this gentleman, and he found out it was his brother. And David said, well, what's your name? And the kid said, my name is David. So what his parents had done was they had dumped off David, went to the West Coast, had another child, and named him David. So here's set him in a tailspin. All these horrible things happened to him. And then, but finally, the universe kind of stepped in for him, because David actually met a partner that actually helped him get on the road to recovery, and he's become a successful artist. Now, David always wanted to be an artist. And his whole life, he said, I always wanted to be an artist. And 2 years ago, they were cleaning out more of the estate from his father, who had passed away. And now David had applied to an art school when he was in high school. And, this was his dream to do it. And he never heard from them, and so his life took a different path. Well, they found in there the letter from the art school that he had been accepted, with a note that the father had not gave it to him because he didn't want to lose the check from the foster care. So here was a man whose whole life was changed just by a simple thing of a letter. Now, the happy part of all this story is the fact that David is now a very successful artist because of all of the trauma that he has went through. He's now hanging in museums all over the world next to Picasso, and doing all these wonderful things because this fueled him. I like to share his life a little bit, because what it did for me was that it triggered something that I had always wanted to do, was like, I don't like to hear when people say, I don't like Christmas. Now, this has nothing to do with religion or any of that stuff. It's about that moment in time when you get to be a child and that you actually get to acquire some sort of foundation and make your own decisions, and that fun and that wonderment that occurs. And I came up with this little idea that I thought, wouldn't it be great to create a camp for foster kids, a Christmas camp? And it wasn't about coming there and like any religious, teaching religion and all this stuff, but just telling all aspects of Christmas for these poor, unfortunate kids that don't get to make the cookies, they don't get to do the Christmas play, they don't get to hear the Christmas stories, they don't get to do all of this fun stuff. And I thought, well, and then I thought some more about it, and I thought, well, David had always said that when he was an orphan, it was very challenging because the Catholic orphanages used to line them all up and make them smile really pretty and get really cleaned and hope you would be chosen by the people looking for kids. And I thought, there's got to be a better system in this country for these kids. And I thought, well, it sounds simple, but if you created a whole camp And at the end of the week, you had this wonderful talent show or just this wonderful Christmas pageant, unbeknownst to the kids. An invited audience would occur to people looking to adopt, where that you are now able to come to this wonderful show, get a list of all the kids that are looking for homes. The kids don't have to know it. They don't have to go through that process of I picked you, I picked not, whatever. They're just saying it's a bunch of people coming to see them. And I'm still in the process of figuring out the logistics of that. But it is something that is kind of near and dear to me. Also, I mean, and other things that I'm looking to do is like work on Hollywood a little because we need to make Christmas a little bit happier. We just need to make it a little bit happier. And I'm talking Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever you want to do. I love it all. They're all celebrations. We should all be enjoying all of them at the same time. I don't know why it has to be such a big deal. Now, I know we have to close this up here, but I want to close this with some another one of those little people in my little people. That's really rude. A giant person in my life who I happened to meet on one of my trips to Europe. Now, I'm a big fan of Greece. I love the Greeks. I love all things Greeks. It's just me. I mean, that's one of my spiritual places. And I was walking along one of the paths near the Parthenon, and this little lady, she was sitting over in the doorstep, and she goes, "Hey, Blondie." Everyone calls me Blondie. "Blondie." And I go, "Yes, ma'am." And she says, "Come here." So I said, "Okay." So I walked over and I said, "Yes, ma'am. How can I help you?" And she goes, "You American?" And I go, "Yes." And that's what she did. And I said, "Why did you just sigh?" She goes, "Well, we love Americans." She goes, "But I want you to tell your friends back home, when they come to our country, we are so interested in who they are and not what they do." And I was like, whoa. Because if you think about it, what's the first thing you do when you go up to say, "Hi, what do you do?" We become a country of what do you do instead of who you are. And I went, wow. And then I was walking back, and she says, "Blondie." I was like, "Yes, ma'am." She goes, "So no need to look at your shoes." She said, "Always remember, life is up here." And I was like, oh, I'm going to cry. So anyway, do I have any questions here? I mean, I don't want to end on I'm supposed to be the shallow end of the pool. I brought my Star magazine and everything. So if there's anything you want to know, I can tell you. Questions?
I want to know, I'm just so curious, what is your fascination with celebrity? Because I'm fascinated by it, and I'm fascinated by you, and you're saying it's shallow, but what is your fascination with celebrity?
Testing. Okay. My fascination with celebrity, there's a couple of things with that. First of all, I view celebrity as a sense of power, okay? And I'm the first to admit that. The deal with celebrity is that I don't sense it in a power that lords over people, but I sense it as a way to reach a very large audience. Because if you think about it, even though most of the people get up there and they talk, who do you listen to? Are you going to listen to your local senator, or are you going to listen to Kim Kardashian sometimes? I'm a bad example. But I mean, what do we tune into? Sometimes it's a necessary evil, to do. And I'm infatuated by that, by the uses that it can occur because of it. Now, on a purely superficial note, yes, I love to be noticed. I love to meet people because when I was growing up, I had to struggle, if you could believe, to actually make people and engage stuff. The reason I have such an outgoing personality is because I had to do all the work to get the people to come in. Now, when you get a little bit of celebrity around you, it just makes your life a little easier because people actually come to you. That's really, and I love to have my picture taken. I don't always look good at them, but I love to have them taken. Anybody else? Oh, come on. There we go.
When you first started, you jokingly invoked Mother Teresa and Lynn, and yet your goal is to help get fosters adopted.
Well, you joked about Mother Teresa because, I mean, first of all, am I really going to compete with Mother Teresa? It was just more, it's my way of sitting there going, oh. It really had nothing other than do with that. I mean, it's nothing about looking at Lynn or thinking it's wrong or any of that kind of stuff. I was actually just standing here going, I've got to compete with Mother Teresa. It's like standing next to me and going, hey.
But
Oh, my coaches.
Mic moment. Mike, can you mic me?
Oh.
He was acknowledging you.
Oh.
He was acknowledging you. And I wanted you to actually receive what he said to you.
See, he's still lecturing
I
me after
know,
all
I
these
know.
years.
It was an acknowledgement moment.
Thank you for the
Correct.
acknowledgement.
Yeah.
We all have to remember, I'm not a coach. And,
No, it's
you know.
okay. It's okay. I just wanted you to feel the
I'm not either.
feel the love is what was
Thank
happening
you.
there.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, good. We'll do one more question and then we'll go
So
on.
a little
there
more
it is.
acknowledgement here, because you said, I don't know what my message is, whatever you take away, fine. So what I take away is you're someone who really appreciates play. Oh my God, we need that. And that's what you do. You bring play, whether it's to the celebrities or to who cares. And the idea that Dr. Christmas is that caricature thing, and Doctor is also a healer, and you're talking about bringing Christmas, like the joy and the you matter, to these children who the world forgets. And if that is not Dr. Christmas, I don't know what is.
Thank you. Very well said. Which, I can't tell you how much I love that, because that's the first time I've ever thought of that. You call yourself Dr. Christmas because you go over and fix things, but it wasn't really ever about healing. Thank you for
Up
that.
until
that was
now.
a lovely. That was a lovely gift.
Everybody repeat it after me. Up until now.
Up until now.
That's your new phrase.
Up until now.
Don't you
huh?
hate this coaching
Oh
stuff?
God, get me off this.
Sorry.
Well, I will be signing autographs and taking pictures
Bob's
right next
book
to
is,
my lovely coffee table book.
must
If anybody
check-
wants one, let me know. Oh, I forgot.
Oh, we have to get up there.
And there it is.
Here, let's do the pose. Let's do the pose.
Oh.
Look what I was eating. Dr. Carol Ann would be freaking. High fructose corn syrup, totally layered in
Look
there.
at that sugar.
I know, exactly.
The mustache. We love that, don't we?
Oh, isn't that weird? Oh my God. Anyway, thank you, Bob, so much. Beautiful. I want to out you a little bit more, not like you're not out already. about the I know. The Christmas camp thing, I want you to know, I'm going to be a little bolder. It has lived in you for many years, and it needs some attention. So I'm giving you full permission to poke at him, push him, coach him, give him ideas. Say it again. Fun him, love him up. This Christmas camp thing is going to happen.